Schönen guten Abend. Ich möchte Sie noch einmal begrüßen im Namen des Realismusstudios der NGBK aus Anlass der Ausstellung Geissler Sann, volatile Smile, die Sie nun alle gesehen haben. Heute Abend ist Brian Holmes unser Gast, dem ich jetzt den Floor übergebe.
Thanks very much, Frank. I forgot to sit down on the floor. Well, thank you all for coming. It's great to see many old friends among the crowd, and I think it will be interesting tonight to talk for a short time precisely about the exhibition and then open up for a conversation that begins with the exhibition and goes beyond it. Actually, this visit here has been planned for a few months, and even a few months before that, Beata Geissler and Oliver Sann and myself began talking about the possibility of working together on a book. So when we decided to do that, I began to kind of plan my calendar so that I would address the subject of financialization of the economy during a one-week intensive summer course at the European Graduate School that I just finished. So that was last week, ending yesterday. And I can tell you it was really amazing to get up in the morning every day, to look at the newspapers, and to get another chapter of the strongest and most, in many ways, most destructive financial crisis that we've had since 1929. And among all the different news items that I would devour, knowing that Oliver and Beata were also setting up the show and being confronted with the same news like everyone else, two things kind of stand out in retrospect. One thing was that on Wednesday, August 10th, the New York Stock Exchange recorded its most intense message traffic ever. On the morning after the exchange opened, over a 30-second period, they recorded 121,257 messages, electronic messages, transiting through the computers of the exchange per second. That means if you would multiply them in a period of an hour, you would be up somewhere around 500 million messages. This just to give you an idea of the more or less unimaginable quantity of signals that now make up that pulsating thing or collection of things and people and wires and values and potentials that we call the financial markets. The other thing that struck me, of course, I would look at several different newspapers, among them the good old New York Times. And in the New York Times, there was a brilliant proposal coming, I think, on the weekend when the activity had subsided. And this proposal was that given the fiscal crisis of the federated states, you know, California falling into the sea and Ohio unable to pay its medical workers and so on, and given that that crisis extends even to that strange sort of city-state we call the District of Columbia, where Washington is located, that's the DC in Washington, of course. The District of Columbia, like other states, needs money. But of course, they can't raise taxes because of the neoliberal ideology. So the invention they came up with was for the government to sponsor and to collect on internet gambling. So you would bring the basis of the very ethos which has created and sustained the financial markets into every home as a solution to the crisis created by the financial markets. I think there you get an insight into how powerful the ideology of not just free trade, because free trade is one thing. This is computerized gambling. Very sophisticated forms of computerized gambling. Now, in the past, the accusation of gambling is what slowed down the development of the financial markets. And for many years and up to today, when futures, for instance, in bushels of wheat or corn or pork bellies, barrels of pork bellies, are traded, the law required that it be possible to deliver on those futures, that you could actually deliver 5,000 bushels of wheat to someone who had bought a contract for the purchase of that in the future. Because if not, that would be, in the language is, assimilable to, in other words, that would resemble interstate gambling. And for that reason, up until this day, when you buy a futures contract, there is, you could demand the wheat, actually. But these kind of barriers obviously have completely broken down. And in other words, we're headed for a state of what could only be called, I think, collective insanity at this point. And I think that's the reason, probably, that when you go in to the exhibition, what you see is not the wildness of the financial markets, which would immediately become fascinating, captivating, exciting, which would send your blood pumping, which would probably bring crowds of traders around to see how they're... But instead, you see black, lifeless, inert screens. And there's a kind of double thing there. One is the incapacity of photography, which is the primary tool of Geissler and Sann, to capture the action on a trading floor. It's fundamentally the price action, that is to say the movement of series of numbers, one in relation to the other. That can't be captured with a still photograph. But there's another reason there, which is ethical. There's a demand not to let your eyes be fascinated, but to engage in some kind of an analysis. And so for that, there's a movement, a step back from that kind of flickering information that characterizes the relation of the trader to the screens, and a move into some kind of structural analysis of the architecture of the screen world. And that move is the initial and the founding move of this proposal, and I think it's very interesting to take note of it and to think about it in those terms as a structural analysis. Of course, it's only structural at the very first degree, because what it shows, what you see, is you see different arrays of screens which are used by different kinds of traders. So you're seeing the difference between, say, a trader in stocks and a trader in options or trader in currencies. They use different sets of screens, and then sometimes you see only a cluster of small screens. This is probably the workstation of one of the programmers, because on these big trading floors, there isn't they have learned the value of the flattened hierarchy probably before anyone else. So everyone works together, everyone cooperates, and this is the environment in which the contemporary economic chaos is made at the highest level of productivity of intellectual labor. And so when you look again at the exhibition, take note of the different groupings of screens, and from this that can be a kind of signifier that will rest in your memory, and it may become useful to you later when you're trying to get a handle on all this. Another aspect of this stillness is to give you an immediate contact with what is called a black box. Black box is obviously something fundamental to contemporary culture. It's the machine that has an input and an output, and in the center, either a function